Let's now talk about presupposition at discourse level and how this could be helpful in understanding and examining critical discourse analysis or the critical discourse analysis of various texts. Text and discourse level actually deals with the position of information in a text, how the text fits in the overall knowledge in a certain text or in a certain discourse, as well as in a certain discourse community. For this matter, it relies heavily on various allusions which are provided in a text, presumptions, background knowledge, etc. We need to look at both what is not presupposed but rather asserted, presented as reality, as new, and we also need to widen the scope of presuppositions by looking into their associations and implications. That would, at discourse level, we have to sometimes have to go beyond the traditional conceptualization of presuppositions, and we have to involve certain elements like background knowledge, shared knowledge, in order to understand the meaning properly. Look at this example again. Stop nagging about his work. There is some kind of a domestic aspect of passive femininity involved in here. It is just presupposed, which underlies the specifics of the speech act related to advice. But this advice involves some kind of passive femininity on which this advice is spelled. So there is a clear presumption about this kind of femininity here, and we can see that this is true to some cultures. The use of unmitigated imperatives is rather a matter of style also, which construct the advice giver as an authority, who has the authority to give advice to the people, and it also constructs the advice in a way that looks beneficial for the recipient, and that's how various ideological patterns are also conveyed to the people in critical discourses. However, when someone is advised to do something unusual, some justification is needed to be provided in the course of action, otherwise people might not be convinced in that deep way. For example, it takes some explanation as to why it has to be cinnamon or garlic that the reader has to give to her partner, and this generally, this kind of discourse presupposes that an advice is being given to a woman who is responsible of taking care of a family's kitchen, to take care of what is happening, to serving meals, making tea to the partner, or even to giving multivitamins. And she is probably advised to give a certain kind of thing and not the other one because related to kitchen, because it is already presupposed that she is responsible for this. Just look things in comparison. If we have to give any advice to a male regarding cooking, we will focus on the phenomenon of cooking for the sake of pleasure. Let's say that men should cook for pleasure, or men should cook to make their partners happy. It would not get into details that he should cook this or that, or he should provide this thing in cooking to his partner, or another thing. So that's where presuppositions come into play, that a certain kind of discourse actually has certain ideological backgrounds based on the certain aspects or particular aspects of various contexts. Identifying and studying presupposition through presupposition triggers, traditional triggers on lexical or semantic level, as well as on sentence level, may not be maybe theoretically problematic and not very useful for deep discourse analysis these days. And that's why we have to involve the factor of knowledge, background knowledge or shared knowledge, along with the triggers, so that we could reach the deeper meanings. Traditional presupposition triggers are most useful as related to the matters of emphasis in terms of foregrounding and backgrounding in critical discourse analysis, as well as they can be useful for some other parameters like framing, contextualization of a certain text, etc., etc. So we can see that traditional triggers can be helpful in certain ways, but if we look at the deeper meaning, ideological, power relation related meanings of a text, we probably would have to go beyond it. If we define presupposition as shared knowledge, we need to be explicit about what kind of beliefs we are talking about and how they surface in discourse and shared, and by whom they are being shared. So we can involve some kind of shared knowledge also, but while we involve shared knowledge with presupposition, traditional concept of presupposition, we need to be very specific that what kind of shared information is being employed and on what belief system that shared knowledge is based on. We need to be explicit about the triggers based on which we analyze text as presupposing certain knowledge. We should be very clear. And we should also, it's also necessary to decide what is shared knowledge and what is not, as well as whether this knowledge is ideological based on our knowledge of the social context or it is beyond it. As I said a while ago, that we should not only be emphasizing on including or expanding the dimension of presupposition of discourse analysis at discourse level in critical discourse studies, but we should also be very particular that this merger may not be counterproductive, and in order to safeguard or in order to save us from this threat, we should be very cautious about the nature of the shared knowledge and the belief system it is based on. Presuppositions have been very important contribution to unearth even non-obvious expression of ideological beliefs in discourse, and that is the reason why this the presupposition and its various aspects, dimensions, to sum this up here, have been a part of various very important critical discourse studies recently, and this presuppositional knowledge belonging to pragmatics, traditional pragmatics, has been employed even by very renowned analysts in critical discourse studies. For example, by Fairclough, Christie, Talbot. We have Polizo, we have Flardew, and many others. There is a huge list down here. I would sum this up here, that presupposition, if handled carefully, can be a very important tool in understanding the underlying belief systems, ideologies, power relations in discourses, various kinds of socio-political discourses, which is obviously the major purpose of critical discourse analysis. In other words, we can say that presuppositions and the knowledge related to presuppositions can be very useful in conducting a successful critical discourse analysis.